Having too much fun?
No. If I thought I had the money, I would. If somebody said, Lynn, right now you said, Lynn, I am here from the heavens to say we have now looked at all your finances, we've gone through your worst case scenarios, like if you need 24-hour care starting tonight, and actually you're in shape.
Here we go. Alex. 3, 2, 1, 2.
Coming to you live from the Chicago Sun-Times headquarters in the West Loop, it's election eve. It's the Illinois primary is Tuesday. Candidates are in the final stretch to get out the voters. Welcome to our very first Sun-Times election show. I'm Lynn Sweet, the Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief. We're going to be joined by a panel of experts for information and analysis. We're going to give you a preview of the big storylines that may emerge from the Tuesday vote. What could those storylines be? Well, one of the things I want to know on the Democratic side, who's going to win, the progressive or the establishment Democrats? On the Republican side, it's the flip of the same coin. Who's going to win, the Trump Republicans or the Rauner Republicans? First, though, let's talk about turnout. Every sign points to a more robust turnout in this Illinois midterm election than we've had in past years, and there's no one better around to help me analyze this trend than Cook County Clerk David Orr. David, welcome to our very first Sun-Times show. So everyone knows, I've covered David for years, since you were an alderman.
Many years.
And I know this 2018 marks your last election that you will be presiding over as Cook County Clerk. So, all the best to you next year when you could just watch this as a bystander. But right now, you have some pretty interesting statistic that your office, which people should know, covers suburban Cook County. You've got a lot of real interesting statistics about what's going on in the early vote. So tell me a little bit about what you see going on both in the number of people voting and because you could figure out the demographics, who are they?
Okay, well, the key about numbers is we see a dramatic increase in early voting. Okay, we broke records, which is very significant. We have a higher turnout than normal in mail voting. And if you look at the early voting, one of the interesting numbers, besides 84% of all that number being from 45 and up in terms of age, and also female, 54% to 45%. But besides that, 80% of all the early voters in suburban Cook alone, are taking a Democratic ballot.
Okay, let's absorb that. 80%, almost 80% early vote. Do you, by chance, have any comparison in past years? Is this kind of how it always has been?
No, I don't have the numbers before, but it's not like it always is. Suburban Cook used to be more of a Republican area, and that's been changing. What I think, my best guess on this is, it's not the Republicans aren't voting, they're just not voting in the robust, enthusiastic way the Democrats are. So some people would say, oh, well, Republicans are taking Democratic ballots to vote Barrios out. I don't think so. I think it's just all the excitement you've seen around the country so far, which you've covered over and over again, is here in Cook County, and it's also being generated by the hot contests that we have in the Democratic Party.
So what would you think are the hottest ones that might prompt voter turnout?
Well, the hottest are clearly governor and Cook County assessor, by far.
Isn't it? So it's interesting. Sometimes people in Washington say, oh, everybody must be interested in, obviously, the governor. I say, well, politics are local.
Absolutely. Obviously, the Attorney General race, we have like 8 different Democratic candidates.
Right.
But this assessor race is knocking people's socks off, and it seems to generate so much excitement that the other candidates, Attorney General candidates, governor candidates, they keep talking about the assessor's race, trying to win points that way. So in this case, I do think you'll see the progressive winning. I don't know, governor's going to be close, but I think the progressive wins.
So we're going to pivot for a second. I want to get back to some early vote questions. Okay. But David Orr is a representative of the regressive wing of the progressive wing in Illinois politics for many years now.
I'd like to see alternatives to the traditional machine, yes.
Right. On it. So do you see any sign yet that all the talk we have seen of this post-Trump Democratic uprising, the indivisibles, the resistance, our revolution, people that I know a lot of your allies are involved in on it. Do you think some of this early vote number is a result of people who usually never vote coming in early, or just people who choose now as a matter of convenience to vote early?
It's certainly partly convenience, but I think it's more than that. I think it's a spirit, and I do think what you might call the more progressive side is more excited at the moment, and you see that in some of the races, you see it in some of the candidates. So yes, that's partly driving it. How much it affects turnout, we don't know yet, but turnout will clearly be dramatically up over 4 years ago.
Wow. Now, I know you're able to figure out some other demographics. What could you tell us about gender? Who's voting more in the early vote?
Well, like I said before, it's about 54%, a little more than that, versus 45% for men. So there's quite a few more early votes coming from women. Now, male, I haven't seen the numbers yet. It might be a similar factor there. And as for age, young people don't tend to vote early nearly as much because they tend to vote on election day.
See, now that's interesting, because I would have guessed that young people would be the ones, young by whatever definition we have of young, which is 3 days younger than David and me. But I would have thought that somebody who would have known how to look up where to go to early vote, and who wouldn't want to be bound by something as, why do I have to do this on one day thing. So that's not
they certainly do that, because
yeah.
we saw a dramatic surge in online registration from young people using their phones. But in this particular case, we don't know yet whether or not there's going to be a dramatic turnout in young people yet.
Okay, so clarify something I'm not sure about in the new law in Illinois. Can you register on the same day or not? Could you explain to everybody what's going on there so they know on Tuesday, if they haven't done anything yet, what their options are?
Yes, in Illinois, we recently passed Election Day registration. That means on Tuesday, Election Day, anybody can go into their home precinct. That's the key. Not an early voting site, into their home precinct where they can register and vote. Just like a normal registration, they bring 2 pieces of identification, one of them with their current address on it, and then they can register and vote at the same time.
So this is important, people. If you're kind of late to the game here and you're not sure if you were going to vote tomorrow or not, and then you think, well, gee, I never registered. It's a new set of rules in 2018. So David, I just want to emphasize, if you have not registered, if you know nothing about the process except you're tuning in for the first time now, all you have to do is what tomorrow?
You go to your home precinct anytime between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m., bring 2 pieces of identification, one with your current address on it, and you can register and vote at the same time. And if you're 17 and you're going to be 18 before November 6th, which is the general election, you can now register and vote as a 17-year-old.
In the primary?
In the primary.
And how do people find out what their local polling place is?
Well, we mail to everybody, but the best way is to go online, okay? If you live in suburban Cook, go to cookcountyclerk.com. If you live in the city, go to chicagoelections.com, or just frankly call around. But don't be confused, because sometimes, school right across the street may not be your precinct. You may see the flag, but it may not be yours, because sometimes the street may be the dividing line.
Right. So one of the things that we have in Illinois and around the country are very local election authorities. So if you're listening to us and you're in DuPage County or Lake County or Kane County, start with Google and just do, what would you think, Kane County and election, or use your county and election and clerk?
Yeah, most of my colleagues in all those counties, the clerks, have very similar things. They have good websites. They have information about how you find out where you're voting. So look at the clerk's website in any of those townships, in those counties, and you can find the same thing.
Okay, so that is our kind of public service thing. So you can find out to vote. This is a new era in allowing yourself to vote if you haven't done anything beforehand. And let's remind people who, again, may be new to the process, you do have to pick a side in Illinois. You have to, or what are the options you have in a primary? Can you help explain
What happens in Illinois is that you have a choice. You can take a Republican ballot, a Democratic ballot, in some cases a Green Party ballot. There's not many candidates in the Green Party ballot. But you have a choice, and let's say tomorrow you would take a Democratic ballot, but next primary you take a Republican. You don't have to worry about that. You're not committed a lifetime. It's just what ballot you want today. And that's important because people don't want to be labeled. And so we tell our judges, don't say, what's your party? Instead we try and say, what ballot would you like today?
Hey, that's a real important point, because especially in this highly political environment that we're in right now, people who might be newcomers to the process will say, you mean I have to choose? I wanted to vote for this person for Attorney General and that person for Governor,
Right.
but you can't do that.
You can't now. You can, of course, in November.
Yeah.
But there's a party primary, and there's big debates about that. You know, one side says, well, let those party faithful decide. But realistically, for example, at the county level, all the Democrats that win Tuesday are going to be elected in November. So the decision really is tomorrow. So if you don't go in the primary battle, you're not involved in electing the major countywide offices.
Well, that's interesting. So as we wrap this up, one of the things that has been such a big concern throughout the country and here is the security of our election systems. Russian hacking, we know that Illinois had some incursion by an outside nation last year, though no information was taken. Do we have anything to worry about in election security in Cook County?
Well, I think we're going to be fine, but I would say, of course, we worry. It's our job to worry. We do all sorts of testing, risk assessments every day. We're working carefully with Homeland Security and the FBI and others. We're all very serious about security, and we put out a white paper on it. But here's the key to understand, is that no matter what happens, whether we got hacked or something else, we still can put together, because we have paper ballots for everything. If you vote on the so-called touchscreen, you do like all this, the paper record is still the official record, and we have that. And if you vote on paper, the paper ballots, we have that. So we can always put together an exact replica of the election.
Important to know. So David, after 38 years in public service, I've covered you for many of them. I want to wish you the best after this election, the November election, for your next chapter in life. And as I bid you would do, we're going to be seating our next panel. So happy Election Day Eve to you.
Thank you, Len. I've admired your good work for a long time, so keep it up.
Well, thank you very much. And again, let me welcome everybody to the Chicago Sun-Times first ever election special. This is Election Eve. We'll also be coming to you again tomorrow night, starting, I think, around 6:30. I think it is 6:30. This is the first time we're doing this. And I just want to pick up on one thing that Cook County Clerk David Orr said to people out there. If you have not registered to vote, this is a new era in Illinois voting. You could just Google around, find where your election place is, put in your county clerk and the name of your county, and you'll be able to find where your polling place is. Then you go there, bring some identification, and you'll be able to sign up to vote. The other thing I thought that what David Orr said that was very interesting is that no matter what you might worry about in election security, there still will be a paper trail in Cook County. So just to recap, we're going to be coming to you live tomorrow night from our West Loop election headquarters. We're going to give you analysis, we're going to give you the latest returns, and hopefully we're going to give you a lot of expert insight too. We're going to have our Sun-Times reporters joining us, that is before they have their deadline, and then they'll be coming back to us now. Now in just another moment, we'll be bringing to you our first panel. We're going to try and mix it up in the next bit of time as you're watching. Republicans and Democrats are going to bring in you experts from all over the place. And I now want to welcome, and here's one thing before I introduce our panel, since I'm all for having everybody the same height, if you want to take a moment before I introduce you to get your seat up.
How's that?
A little more, even a little more, a little more, a little more. There we go. Okay, now, joining me more, my experts, we have Eric Elk, longtime Republican operative, and then I have Rakisha Phelan, who's a longtime Democratic operative. And folks, these people are fluent in politics. This is their language, the two of them, even though they're on different parties, right?
Right.
You two could talk. You're fluent in statewide politics. You know about turnout, you know about messaging, you know about strategy. They both have worked on a lot of campaigns. They know the stuff. You know, someone like Eric, he hasn't, I've been trying to get stuff from him for years. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So let me just say, though, I hope...
It's not just you.
So what I want to know now is, David Orr talked about this early vote. Would you two, first you, Keisha, what do you think is going to happen tomorrow? Do you think we really will have some kind of big Democratic turnout here?
I think we're seeing a lot of energy on the Democratic side, and I was asking around a little bit about that today, and it's Of course, we know the numbers on the early vote, and of course that's going to translate, we think, into overall turnout being up. And it's just, what is accounting for that? What is accounting for the Democratic energy? And there are a lot of people that are just eager to cast that first vote in sort of their anti-Trump mindset. Is this their first opportunity to start down that road? And so there's a lot of energy still around that, even though he's not on the ballot.
And I wrote a column about it today that Trump is a factor in both parties in different ways. And we'll get to how Trump plays in the Republican side in a minute. So we've heard a lot post-Trump. We had the Women's March right after he was inaugurated. We had another one this year. We had the Invisibles, the Resistance. When you say there's Democratic energy, are we talking about Democrats who vote all the time anyway energy, or are we talking about what?
Well, it'd be interesting to see. We know the folks that are going to come out that are normally coming out, but I think what we're going to see is energy that's going to bring out more young people. It's going to bring out more women, and hopefully it's also translating into an increase in the African American vote. They've got some options to look at there, but we see that energy really on that side of things.
Well, and it's interesting because on the Democratic ballot, you have diversity. In that 8-person Democratic Attorney General race.
Right.
On it, you've got a lot going on to jazz up voters. But now let's look at the Trump factor. How does it play on the Republican side in turnout?
I think it definitely could play. I think it's something that I think all candidates are probably thinking about in the back of their mind. No question. I mean, it's just like a number of candidates that we saw even in Pennsylvania, the way they're thinking about Nancy Pelosi. I mean, our candidates are thinking about the impact of Trump, no question.
Well, so that's interesting because Democrats were helped in turnout in Virginia, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania recently. So as a Republican strategist, would you think in Illinois tomorrow this will help more Republicans come out even though it's a primary?
I think folks want to come out. No question. I think that there's a lot of energy on the Democrat side. You have a very competitive Democrat gubernatorial race. You have a very competitive Attorney General race right now. I don't know that, Jeannie Ives has just recently started to come on. I mean, she, got her money from Dick Uihlein and really started to spend on some of that, but you really haven't had a lot of energy from their side recently.
But so I want to test this theory on you. That Jeannie Ives is competitive. She started late. Rauner has millions upon millions. He's been the governor. She is running as unabashedly pro-Trump. Rauner.
In a blue state.
In a blue state. And Rauner, and this is me, not Eric. Rauner's wobbly on Trump. Me, not Eric. Okay. So even though looking at these numbers for suburban Cook County, they still show a robust Republican turnout. Is this helping Rauner? Is this helping Ives? What's your analysis?
I think it'll help. It'll help the governor. It'll help Rauner. I think that what happens though in some of these suburban communities or the collars that you mentioned, folks can't take it for granted. Folks have to work. Folks have to turn out. And, each of their campaigns need to get their base out. They need to turn out as many people as they can. For so long, I'm from Lake County, and we saw this where it became a switch. For so long it was a Republican county, and it's not so much the case anymore. You even saw that in DuPage, where you have, folks like Congressman Roscoe. Hillary Clinton got, 7% or won by 7 points in his district. It's not, you can't take that for granted. They have to work.
Right. So let's game this out a little bit. What are the races that you think this is like a game, I'll take it at lunch no matter who wins. What race do you think will be the biggest surprise tomorrow night? Okay, first on the Democratic side.
Biggest surprise.
Yeah, and we have county races, state rep, what do you think?
I don't know that it'll be any surprises tomorrow, but I think there's a chance that there are going to be some races that are closer than we expected. And I think, one in particular, the governor's race, obviously JB's had a substantial lead from the beginning, but, watching the surge of Kennedy in the last month or so has been interesting to watch. And we still don't know exactly how close that's going to be. And then I think also on the governor's side, but on the Republican side, there's an interesting conversation that's being had among suburban Republican women, and trying to get a sense of where they're going to break is going to be interesting. I don't think it will be Ives, given her stance on Trump and also on some other issues. But at the same time, Governor Rauner took some action on a guns issue that doesn't necessarily endear him to that. So I feel like the board is scrambled a bit.
Actually, you brought up a very good point. I want to bounce off you. So if you're a swing suburban woman, kind of tend towards Republican, that is your suburban woman vote that all the Republicans have to worry about keeping.
Sure.
So the Rauner signed. What is the shorthand? SB 40? Is that
HB 40?
HB 40. It's making it easier to be paid for some Medicaid abortion-related services, and on guns. In your analysis, do you think this will keep that swing Republican woman within the Republican fold tomorrow?
It may give them some heartburn, but I think it will. I mean, I think some who have a big concern on, the issues that were outlined in HB 40, as well, the gun issue is a big issue for a lot of people. I mean, after what just took place down in Florida, I think a lot of moms and dads have an issue with security, and that's something they're thinking about.
So it's interesting because these are issues, on the abortion issue, in my experience is often what voters want is just somebody take a side and stick to it.
Correct.
Just, some people will be for you and some won't. So how do you think that in the Republican governor's race, how important do you think abortion is as an issue? I mean, I believe that's what animated Jeannie Ives to get in the race.
It's fine, but when the governor ran, everybody knew where he was. That he was pro-choice. He made no bones about it. So this is not a surprise. This was not something that he sprung on people or something
That's
like
a
that.
good point. Yeah.
He was very upfront about it. There were a big women's group who took out a page in the newspaper, the letter thanking him for his position on this when he was running back in 2014. So this is not something new.
So why did it take her so long to get in the race then? If that was not, if a pro-life Republican
You're
all the
asking
time
me to get inside the head of somebody
to
that,
analyze.
I just can't do it. I mean, that's great. I can't do that. But I do think it did take her a while, and who knows what it was. She thinks that she's got a better shot at, fighting the speaker, which I disagree on. I mean, we're looking at one of the most expensive gubernatorial races in history.
Oh my God! There's a technical term. It's called Weismir. Oy vey! This money that Rauner and Pritzker are spending, it is astounding. I think one analyst told me that by the time this could be over in the general, that is, if let's say if JB won and Rauner won, it would be more expensive than some presidential campaigns in past years.
I'd put it up around $300 million this year.
Yeah, I mean it's there. But let's go back. There's a race where I'm going to go to you first because
Sure.
you're in the 3rd Congressional District Democratic primary. Dan Lipinski, Marie Newman. This is. I'm going to let you think about it since you're the Democrat here. This is where you have a pro-life Democrat, abortion right Democrat, a big Democratic family feud with a lot of outside money coming in. So since this isn't your party, your analysis maybe just is sought after. How do you think it might come down out there?
I think it'll be interesting. I think both sides are really battling this out. The one thing I will say, only from personal experience, having worked on the Hill both in the House and in the Senate, is that Congressman Lipinski was always very good about working across the aisle.
Yes.
He was never very partisan. He was, willing to work on an issue that was going to benefit his state, his district, and his country. And so, from that standpoint, that's my viewpoint. That's how I've always viewed both his father and
Right.
Congressman Lipinski, is not being very partisan, but wanting to just get something done and move the ball forward on issues.
Right. So given that, though, one of the things that animate the Marie Newman forces, though, is and each of them have just a long, heartfelt position on abortion. So
Right.
what's your analysis of the 3rd Democratic primary?
Right. It's really easy to divide the candidates here on choice. But the truth is that there's a broader group of issues that Lipinski has been kind of on the wrong side of the Trump side of things here. We can look at healthcare, we can look at Dreamers, so it's not just a choice issue, which is why Newman and others are being pretty effective at labeling him
Right,
kind
so
of the Trump Democrat.
it is some policy differences, not just a willingness to work across the aisle, which is
which that's
something.
commendable. We need more of that in politics, but for people to make the Lipinski argument just about abortion is much more broad than that. We can look at how it's responsive to Dreamers, how it's responsive to healthcare and Obamacare, and he's got a lot of explaining to do.
Okay, so hold these thoughts. Both of these panelists will be back later in our first ever election show from the Chicago Sun-Times. We're going to get some other people seated. I think they're here somewhere. We're a little, this is a little whatever. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Take off your mics.